In the Soul King Palace, a wounded Gerard is thrown into rubble as Renji asks what he was thinking. How many captains and lieutenants of the 13 court guard squads does he think there are? There's no way he could take them all down by himself. However, Gerard merely grins, noting that if Renji thinks he can't defeat them, or if he's suggesting that if he did beat them, it would be a miracle. He asks Renji if he knows when miracles happen, explaining that if a miracle occurs at a meaningless moment, people will not recognize it as a miracle. Instead, they'll dismiss it as mere luck or something strange. Renji then asks Gerard what he's talking about. Gerard responds that he understands why they're captains of the 13th Court Guards. They've wounded him pretty badly. As he proclaims that a miracle is a miracle because it occurs in a crisis, Byakuya engulfs Gerard's head with Senbonzakura and flicks the blade sideways, causing Gerard's head to explode and his bloody helmet to be sent flying. Seeing the helmet fall in front of her, Momo wonders if they really had to go this far. Shinji points out that Gerard had something up his sleeve. Judging from the way he was talking, he saw through what they were planning, and whatever he had planned could have turned the whole situation around. Who knows what would have happened if they hadn't gone this far? He then asks Captain Kuchiki if he has concluded correctly. But Byakuya isn't finished, and he blasts Gerard's fallen body with Senbonzakura a second time. He attempts to leave with the other Shinigami, only to be interrupted by a giant foot smashing into the ground next to them. As the Shinigami wonder what's going on, an enormous Gerard appears before them, smashing through nearby structures. He yells that his name is Gerard Valkyrie, and his shrift is M, the miracle. His power allows him to exchange what has been wounded for God's size. He adds that he understands why they are captains of the 13th Court Guards. They wounded him pretty badly. This is the first time he's become this massive from an exchange. Gerard tears off and throws a tower at the Shinigami, forcing them to scatter as Shinji grabs Momo's hand when she begins to fall. Gerard smashes his hand down on the area where Shinji and Momo are. As Renji and Rukia cry out for their comrades, Byakuya attacks Gerard with Senbonzakura, only for Gerard to block the petals with his bare hand before destroying the building where Byakuya is standing. After blowing Rukia and Renji away with his breath, Gerard asks if it isn't frightening to be powerless. He tells them not to lament. No matter how much they do, there will be no miracle. It's explained that Leela was the leader of the Schutzstaffel, and he was the first Quincy to whom Yhwach granted a shrift. His position was unquestioned. However, the other two remaining Schutzstaffel members, Pernida and Gerard, had powers before Yhwach granted them anything. They were Quincy's whose powers Yhwach did not bestow. Among the Schutzstaffel, only these two were assigned a shrift according to the powers they already possessed. That's why rumors about who they really were spread among other Quincy's. According to these rumors, Pernida was supposedly the Soul King's left arm, and Gerard was the Soul King's heart. Meanwhile, as Gerard continues to walk through the city, Hiyori and Hachigen hide within a building. Hiyori wonders how Gerard managed to defeat everyone. Gerard rests his arm on a building, saying it was too easy. He claims that they may be captains of the 13th Court Guards, but against his miracle, they're all helpless. As Hiyori and Hachigen prepare to make their move, Gerard remarks that their spiritual pressures are so faint he can barely sense them anymore. Now he has to rummage through the rubble in his godlike form to find those who remain. It's like stepping on an ant in the sand. It's almost impossible. That's exactly why he will find them, he declares, before smashing the building behind him, wondering if the Shinigami really thought he wouldn't find them if it was impossible. It's a miracle because the impossible becomes possible. However, Hiyori appears behind Gerard, saying he can talk about miracles all he wants, but to them, it's just gibberish. She then fires a Sero at Gerard, who brushes it off and asks if she really thought that would work on him. Hiyori replies that no, she didn't. Not if it was just her. Hachi, Love, and Lisa appear behind him, unleashing their respective attacks, engulfing Gerard in a huge explosion. However, Gerard withstands their attacks and sends all four of them flying into nearby buildings. Realizing that this will never end at this rate, he decides to drop the entire area on top of them. To Gerard's surprise, his arm suddenly freezes in place. Hitsugaya reveals himself, noting that judging by the spiritual pressures, Kyoraku and several lieutenants should still be around. He asserts that he can't allow Gerard to let them fall and tells him to stay frozen there forever. When Gerard asks who he is, Hitsugaya introduces himself as captain of Squad 10 of the 13 Court Guards, Toshiro Hitsugaya. Gerard then introduces himself as well, as Stern Ritter Schutzstaffel Gerard Valkyrie, and shatters the ice covering his arm before saying it's a pleasure to meet Hitsugaya as he smashes the area where he's standing. However, Hitsugaya merely dodges and asserts that he didn't come here to be friendly before activating his Bankai, Daiguren Hyorin Maru, engulfing the upper half of Gerard's body in ice. Gerard breaks out of the ice encasing him and roars. Hitsugaya notes that it couldn't even stop him for a moment. Gerard sure is tough. Gerard asks if Hitsugaya thinks he could stop him with those ice tricks. As he reaches toward Hitsugaya, Gerard's arm is suddenly blocked by Senbonzakura. Byakuya tells Hitsugaya that he will need help to defeat Gerard, as he's a difficult opponent to take on one-on-one. Hitsugaya notes that with their height difference, 2 against 1 wouldn't be cowardly. As Byakuya gives him a bombastic side-eye, Hitsugaya asks why he's looking at him like that. Does he want to imply that he always has a height disadvantage? Byakuya tries to cover up, saying that of course he wasn't, but ultimately folds and apologizes. As Gerard moves to attack the captains, his arm is suddenly severed by Kenpachi, who criticizes how the captain classes are all easily wiped out. Seeing Kenpachi, both Hitsugaya and Byakuya comment in sync that trouble has arrived. Earlier, Kenpachi wakes up within his healing pod and wonders where he is before kicking the door off, allowing him to step outside. In the present, Ikkaku and Yumichika express shock at their captain arriving at the scene before them. Gerard regenerates his severed arm, which he claims is now even stronger. When Hitsugaya asks how Gerard's arm regrew, Byakuya explains that Gerard's ability allows the wounded area of his body to grow in size and strength. Hitsugaya notes that he understands, so Gerard wasn't always that big then, and looks at Byakuya, asking if he has something to say. Byakuya replies that he doesn't, telling Hitsugaya that he's being overly sensitive. While they are chatting, Kenpachi decides to dice up Gerard to see what happens, only for Hitsugaya to intercept his slash. Kenpachi asks Hitsugaya what he is doing, stating that he would have sliced him in half if he hadn't held back. Kenpachi is more considerate than Hitsugaya thought, but he needs him to be a little more considerate. Kenpachi doesn't understand what he means by that. Hitsugaya asks what Kenpachi thinks will happen if they make Gerard any bigger and he falls down. But Kenpachi wonders what the issue is, as he'll fall with Gerard and cut him up. Hitsugaya exclaims that if a guy of his mass falls from this high, that alone would annihilate the capital. But just then, Gerard stomps on Hitsugaya. Kenpachi merely grabs his foot before pushing him back, sending Gerard flying into the center of Warvelt. Kenpachi leaps after Gerard, stating that, in other words, all he needs to do is stop toying with him and go straight to cracking his head open. But Gerard deflects his subsequent attack by blowing Kenpachi back with his shield before drawing his weapon. Noting that Kenpachi made him fall over and that he is strong, Gerard hates to be so cruel, but Kenpachi leaves him no choice. Proclaiming that a powerful embodiment of darkness such as Kenpachi shall become rust on his Hoffnung, Sword of Hope. Having been sent crashing through several buildings, Kenpachi merely states that he can't believe he couldn't cut it. A tough shield and a tough body. This makes him want to cut them even more. He releases his shikai, Nozarashi. Hitsugaya is shocked to see Kenpachi's shikai, wondering when he got that. Meanwhile, Byakuya realizes that Kenpachi's sword wasn't a constant release type, or perhaps a constant release type never existed in the first place. As Gerard attacks with his enormous blade, Kenpachi blocks the slash, manages to repel Gerard, and leaps into the air as Gerard reveals Kenpachi has managed to nick the blade of Hoffnung. But suddenly Kenpachi receives a large cut in his torso. As blood spurts from his wound, Kenpachi wonders what just happened, prompting Gerard to claim that there's nothing to ask. His power is a miracle that turns people's wishes into reality. This body, which cannot be destroyed, is enlarged by people's fears. Hoffnung is a sword of the people's hopes bundled together. When it breaks, there will be despair. Hitsugaya notes that he doesn't understand what Gerard is saying, but he knows that he's got an ability that goes against all reason. However, Kenpachi understood, mentioning that all he has to do is defeat Gerard without breaking his sword. He calls Gerard a fool for giving him the solution himself, asserting that he's going to regret that. But Gerard proclaims that he's telling Kenpachi this in order to fill the enormous gap in their powers. He's a fool if he doesn't realize that, asserting that it's Kenpachi who will regret it. As a stunned Hitsugaya states that he's beginning to think these two are alike, Kenpachi and Gerard begin fighting. Gerard tries to attack by thrusting his sword into the ground, but Kenpachi climbs up and slashes at Gerard, who dodges the attack and throws Kenpachi into the buildings. Kenpachi immediately leaps out of the debris and states that he's impressed with Gerard's speed given his enormous size. Gerard in turn says the same of his opponent, claiming that he's going to crush him in his hand. Hitsugaya attempts to intervene, but Gerard tells him to stay out of this, saying he's not his opponent, and tries to attack him. However, Kenpachi intervenes, smashing Hitsugaya to the ground below and telling him to stay out of it. As Hitsugaya tries to rebuke, Byakuya steps in, telling him not to bother. Zaraki can't be reasoned with either. Hitsugaya states that he knows that's why they can't go on ahead without him, pointing out that Gerard is not someone Zaraki can handle alone. As proof of that, Zaraki's already taken off his eye patch. He instinctively knows he had to take it off to beat him. Taking a closer look, Byakuya realizes that so many of Hitsugaya's ice flowers have fallen. It's understandable. They're all exhausted. None of them have much time. Hitsugaya tells Byakuya that he'll freeze the giant when he gets the chance, so Byakuya should pulverize him with Senbonzakura. From what he's gathered, he should be able to freeze Gerard to the bone at maximum output, but it'll take time, so he needs his help. Meanwhile, Kenpachi and Gerard continue clashing, with Kenpachi slowly but surely being overwhelmed as Gerard sends him flying, pointing out that Kenpachi's swings are getting weaker. He proclaims that it's only natural. Fighting him without chipping his sword was impossible to begin with. Swords get nicked in battle, and despair will be carved into Kenpachi's body. As Kenpachi leaps back to attack, Gerard compliments his relentlessness and applauds his spirit. However, spirit alone won't close the gap between their powers, and he beats Kenpachi back once again. Byakuya tries to attack him with Senbonzakura in the air behind him, but Gerard easily intercepts it and also smashes his sword into Hitsugaya, proclaiming that he can see them both scheming to catch him off guard. He's the biggest, strongest, and fastest Quincy. He's the warrior bestowed with everything. They can't outwit him even once. Suddenly, Yachiru appears before Kenpachi and asks him what he's doing lying down like that, urging him to keep fighting. Kenpachi asks the little devil where she's been, but Yachiru merely responds that if he uses her properly, there's nobody he can't cut. As energy begins flowing down Kenpachi's arm from where she touched him, Kenpachi wonders what this power is. Yachiru asks if he doesn't know anything before revealing that this power is called Bankai. Hit the subscribe button so you won't miss out on more videos like this, and leave a comment below if you have any suggestions or feedback. Now, let's get back to the video. A massive wave of energy erupts outward from him, startling Byakuya, Hitsugaya, and Gerard, before clearing to reveal Kenpachi, who has gained red skin and a differently shaped sword. As Ikaku and Yumichika express shock at their captain's appearance, Gerard claims to be disappointed, noting that a rapid rise in spiritual pressure suggested a Bankai, yet he sees no significant change. Surely that broken blade cannot be Bankai. He proclaims that there's no point in swinging Hoffnung with Kenpachi holding a broken blade. He shall smash him into oblivion. He then attempts to punch Kenpachi, who responds by biting down on Gerard's knuckle and ripping his entire arm off. Gerard reminds Kenpachi that cutting off his arms will accomplish nothing, but Kenpachi merely leaps into the air before slashing at Gerard, cutting off his left forearm along with half of his shield when he attempts to block the strike. While Gerard is still in shock at his shield being cut, Kenpachi punches him in the chin, sending him flying back off the edge of Varvelt as he wonders what this power is. Suddenly, Gerard activates his Quincy, Vollständig, and flies up, proclaiming that a Soul Reaper pushing him to the brink could never happen. He will not stand for such absurdity. As Kenpachi stands before him menacingly, Gerard exclaims that Kenpachi not fleeing is the height of foolishness. He will perish to ashes. But Kenpachi swiftly leaps forward and cuts him in half vertically. As Gerard's two halves fall down, Byakuya and Hitsugaya watch Kenpachi from afar. When Hitsugaya tries to approach Kenpachi, Byakuya stops him. Hitsugaya asks if he thinks they shouldn't go near him. Byakuya replies that it's obvious. It'll be even more difficult to get through to Kenpachi than usual. Suddenly, Kenpachi leaps back and roars as Gerard's two halves rise and form a Quincy Zeiken with their blood before fusing together, resulting in Gerard reappearing with his Quincy, Vollständig, Ashtonig, active as he fires a beam from the tip of Hoffnung. The beam destroys a large portion of the city, prompting Hitsugaya to freeze much of the rubble in place before it can fall to the Soul Society below, only for Gerard to blast the same area again before proclaiming that he is Ashtonig, God's power, the noble warrior of God, the one who swings his sword for God even in death. Kenpachi prepares to resume his battle, but his right arm suddenly shatters and breaks open as Yachiru apologizes, saying she released too much of his power for his body to handle. After slashing through Kenpachi, Gerard destroys the building Hitsugaya is standing on, prompting Byakuya to catch him with his blade petals before imploring him to deactivate his Bankai because he is at his limit. However, as the flowers of his Bankai start to shatter, Hitsugaya states that he doesn't recall ever saying that it's over when all the ice flowers fall. Revealing that when the ice flowers have all fallen, that's finally when Daiguren Hyorin Maru is complete, he suddenly gains the appearance of an adult. Hitsugaya informs Byakuya that his power isn't yet developed enough to fully command Hyorin Maru. He doesn't know if that's the reason, but when Daiguren Hyorin Maru is complete, he becomes a little older. And he doesn't really like this form all that much. Gerard looks at Hitsugaya and asks who he is. The latter responds by stating that he is Toshiro Hitsugaya. Gerard points out that Hitsugaya had already released his Bankai, so how did he alter himself even further? Then again, it doesn't really matter. He slams his sword down, claiming that right now Hitsugaya is a more worthy opponent than he was moments ago. Hitsugaya dodges the attack. When Gerard throws his shield at him, Hitsugaya freezes it midair before telling Gerard not to throw that huge thing, as he can't let it fall on the Soul Society. Gerard slashes at Hitsugaya, who cuts through the Blade of Hoffnung, stating that its power has ceased to work because it is frozen. All of Gerard's hope has stopped functioning. Gerard then summons his Heilig Bogen, proclaiming that he will simply crush Hitsugaya with a torrent of power without relying on any supernatural functions. However, Hitsugaya notes that he summoned his bow a second too late, as Gerard is frozen solid by Shikai Hyoketsu, which Hitsugaya explains freezes the four elements: earth, water, fire, and wind, in the space Gerard occupies within 4 steps of Daiguren Hyorin Maru's release. If he had shot the Quincy arrow within 3 steps, he might have been able to hit him. Suddenly, Gerard breaks free of the ice and grabs Hitsugaya, proclaiming that he will not freeze, as he is God's warrior. He cannot be bound by the elements of this world, and he will crush Hitsugaya, only to be toppled suddenly by Kenpachi, who grabs and pushes his feet. As Gerard gets distracted by Kenpachi, his arm begins to freeze again due to Hitsugaya, who tells Gerard that he cannot escape unscathed from touching him in this state. But when Gerard proclaims that he cannot be frozen, Byakuya summons the Senkei form of his Bankai, before using its ultimate technique, Ika Senjinka, 1 bite, 1,000 blade flowers. Byakuya's attack destroys Gerard's head, and Hitsugaya freezes Gerard's torso and shatters it. He then collapses from exhaustion and is caught by Byakuya, who comments that it seems like it's a Bankai that takes a heavy toll on the body, though Hitsugaya is holding up better than he imagined. Hitsugaya responds that he's almost at his limit. Suddenly, energy begins forming above Gerard's legs as his body regenerates. Gerard adopts a new form with a helmet-shaped head and a spike on each shoulder. Meanwhile, as they ascend the rubble, Rukia and Renji are startled by a barrage of energy and see Gerard towering above them in his new form, prompting Renji to wonder what it is. When Hitsugaya warns them to be careful because Gerard is now far more powerful than when they faced him before, a confused Renji wonders who he is, leading Rukia to claim that he must be Hitsugaya's older brother, to which Hitsugaya plays along, much to Byakuya's bemusement. Suddenly, the Shinigami look toward the central palace of Warvelt as they sense Ichigo confronting Yhwach. Before moving forward, I would recommend watching my Ichigo and Aizen vs Yhwach fight video, as there are going to be some spoilers ahead. As Rukia and Renji make their way through the battlefield, Gerard swipes at them with his hand. However, Byakuya grabs them and moves them to a safer location before telling them to join Ichigo, as he's already confronting Yhwach. Blocking an incoming strike from Gerard with his Bankai, Byakuya claims that he merely does not need their help here, prompting Rukia and Renji to thank him before leaving. Byakuya then leaps down next to Hitsugaya, who states that Rukia and Renji saw right through his performance. Hitsugaya then states that he thinks it was the right decision, they should be with Kurosaki, and explains how Shinigami who attended the Shinyo Academy weren't taught to fight for their superiors or their families. Rather, all Soul Reapers ought to die protecting friends and humans. He asserts that Kurosaki is their comrade, but to Rukia and Renji, he's a friend. If they are to fight as Soul Reapers, going to Kurosaki is the right thing to do. Balancing right and wrong, such a Soul Reaper-like teaching. Although, even if right and wrong were reversed, they still would have gone to him. As Hitsugaya and Byakuya continue to face off against Gerard, they are shocked to see Gerard's flesh stripped away by the Auswählen, leaving his bones to crash into the ground below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.